What if two of the most famous children in the world never existed? What if I told you that two of the most talked about royal children in the world, Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana, might not even exist? Not just hidden from the public eye, but possibly part of a well-orchestrated illusion. As shocking as it sounds, a growing body of evidence, missing documents, and insider testimony now suggests that something is seriously wrong with the story we've all been told. Could this be the biggest royal cover-up in modern history? It started with a name, two names, in fact. Archie Harrison, Lilibet Diana. Two of the most famous children in the world. Two little souls introduced not through fanfare and fanfare-driven steps on the hospital steps of St. Mary's in London, but instead through filtered photos, hand-picked press releases, and carefully controlled public narratives. For years, the world accepted the story as it was told. A young prince and his Hollywood wife forging a new path in America, trying to shield their children from the unbearable weight of the crown they had stepped away from. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But then came the whisper. A murmur, really. One that began in hushed corners of royal commentary forums. One that danced on the edge of mainstream media but never quite crossed the line. A question so outrageous, so inflammatory, that it was easier to dismiss it than engage with its possibilities. What if Archie and Lilibet weren't real? Not in the symbolic sense. Not in the metaphorical way of not part of royal life, or existing only in seclusion. What if they didn't exist at all? For a long time, the idea remained the stuff of internet fringe speculation. A few obscure YouTube channels, a handful of anonymous Reddit threads, occasional debates over suspicious photos or inconsistencies in timelines. It was all easy to ignore, until Tom Bower stepped into the conversation. Bower wasn't just another talking head with a blog and a grudge. He was one of Britain's most formidable investigative journalists, known for cutting through the polish and pleasantries of the elite with surgical precision. His books had exposed corruption, peeled back carefully constructed public images, and forced some of the most powerful figures in Britain to answer questions they had long dodged. So when Bower emerged with a new dossier, one he claimed could unravel the entire public narrative surrounding Meghan Markle's children, it sent shockwaves not only through Windsor and Montecito, but through every newsroom on both sides of the Atlantic. He didn't just suggest doubt. He dropped evidence. And suddenly, the question wasn't whether Archie and Lilibet were simply hidden. It was whether they were hidden because there was nothing to see. According to multiple sources close to Bower's camp, the claim was straightforward and chilling. Documents didn't line up. Photo metadata raised red flags. Royal aides couldn't recall ever meeting the children in private. Legal arrangements that typically accompany royal births appeared to be either non-existent or shielded in ways that defied standard procedure. Baptism records were absent. No hospital discharge details had ever been filed in the United Kingdom. And perhaps most damningly, multiple individuals who had once claimed to have interacted with the children were now backing off or retracting their statements entirely. The narrative, once solid, had cracks. Deep ones. And Meghan Markle, according to those in her immediate circle, was reportedly livid. Not defensive. Not saddened. Furious. Because while she and Harry had long fought to control the narrative of their new life away from the royal family, this was an accusation that didn't just challenge their privacy, it challenged their very reality. Bower's revelation came as a slow leak, not an explosion. First, a vague reference in an interview. Then a passage in an upcoming book. Then a full-on exposé tease that promised irrefutable proof. The internet, of course, went into overdrive. Everyone had a theory. Everyone had a breakdown. Suddenly, previously ignored posts and fringe content creators were seeing millions of views. Analysts were dissecting old footage. Digital forensic experts began evaluating lighting and facial ratios in Christmas cards. Vocal skeptics, once labeled as cranks, were now finding mainstream platforms. But beneath the noise and the endless commentary, one fact remained unshakable. If what Bower hinted at was true, it would be one of the greatest public deceptions in modern royal history. The implications were staggering. For the monarchy, it would raise questions about the line of succession, legitimacy of titles, and what it really meant for a family member to step back while still retaining core privileges. For Meghan and Harry, it could mean complete public alienation, legal consequences, a shattered public image, and the complete collapse of the carefully curated Archwell brand. But even beyond the legalities and constitutional questions, there was something deeper, more human. It was the betrayal of trust. People around the world had embraced the story, had watched the Oprah interview, had cried with Meghan when she described the pain of racism and rejection, had cheered when Harry said he wanted a better life for his children than the one he had known. They believed them, defended them, supported them through lawsuits and scathing headlines. If the children were real, but hidden for safety, most would understand. But if the children were fabricated for attention, leverage, or manipulation, that was a different story. And it was that possibility that made Bauer's revelations so dangerous. Because it wasn't just a scandal. It was a question of whether millions had been lied to, repeatedly, and without remorse. At the center of it all was Meghan. And her reported reaction to Bauer's hints was explosive. Sources claim that upon reading the first snippet of the coming allegations, Meghan immediately contacted her legal team. A cease and desist letter was drafted. Emergency meetings were scheduled. Crisis PR consultants were looped in. Inside Montecito, the walls were closing in. There were whispers of lawsuits, of plans to go on the offensive. But curiously, there was no actual denial. No formal statement from Archwell. No press release from their attorneys. No sit-down rebuttal on a trusted talk show. Just silence. And that silence spoke volumes. For a couple that had never shied away from clapping back, who had, in fact, made a career pivot out of telling their truth, their hesitation now is glaring. Why not just refute it? Why not show a live video of the children playing in the backyard? Why not end the speculation in 30 seconds? Theories swirled. Some believed they were preparing a masterful counterstrike, waiting for Bauer to publish fully before obliterating his claims with undeniable proof. Others believed the silence was because there was no proof. And the longer the silence stretched, the louder the questions became. Back in the UK, Buckingham Palace remained tight-lipped, as they always did. But behind the scenes, aides were reportedly buzzing. The implications of such a story, if substantiated, could force a rare constitutional review. The titles granted to the children, the line of succession adjustments, the record-keeping of the crown. If the children didn't exist, or existed but weren't biologically Harry and Meghan's, it would trigger a legal labyrinth never before seen in the modern monarchy. And if there had been a cover-up? That was an entirely different beast. Even among supporters of the Sussexes, there was a shift, a quiet unease. People began revisiting past interviews, rewatching the Netflix series, reading between the lines. Why had the children never spoken on video? Why had no known friend of the family ever posted candid footage? Why had even the royal family seemed strangely distant about the children, offering formal congratulations but never personal anecdotes? Was it just privacy? Or was it something more? And amid the swirling storm, one truth cut through the noise. The burden of proof had shifted. It was no longer about whether Tom Bauer could prove the children didn't exist. It was now about whether Meghan and Harry could prove they did. And in today's world, where perception becomes reality and silence becomes suspicion, that's the most dangerous shift of all. This story, at its core, is not just about two children. It's about trust, truth, and the question that now sits on everyone's mind but no one dares to say aloud. What if the fairy tale wasn't just edited? What if it was entirely fiction? This is the storm Tom Bauer has unleashed. And as we peel back the layers, examine the inconsistencies, and ask the uncomfortable questions, one thing becomes clear. Nothing, absolutely nothing, about this story will ever be the same again. Before we dive any further into the whirlwind controversy that now surrounds Meghan Markle, Prince Harry, and their children Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana, we must first understand the man who lit the match and stood unflinching as the firestorm raged around him, Tom Bauer. For those already familiar with British investigative journalism or royal biographies, Bauer is not a new name. For everyone else, his entrance into this scandal may seem abrupt, even sensational. But it is neither. Tom Bauer is a seasoned disruptor, a man who has made a career of pulling back the curtain on the powerful, the protected, and the pristine. If someone like Bauer makes a claim, especially one as explosive as this, the world stops and listens. Not because he's known for clickbait or exaggeration, but because historically he's been terrifyingly right. Born in 1946 in London, Tom Bauer is not your average journalist. Trained first as a barrister, he spent several years working as a producer for the BBC before transitioning into a full-time author. His early career was shaped by documentaries and features that exposed corruption in business and politics. Unlike some media figures who court drama for attention, Bauer built his brand on meticulous documentation, credible sourcing, and a relentless pursuit of truth, even when it meant risking reputations, careers, or legal retaliation. And he's had his fair share of both. Bauer has authored more than 20 books, each one probing deeply into the lives of individuals who prefer to be admired from a distance. His targets have included British prime ministers, billionaires, powerful executives, and royalty. Names like Richard Branson, Simon Cowell, Robert Maxwell, and Prince Charles fill his bibliography, none of them emerging unscathed. His reputation is simple. If Tom Bauer is writing about you, be afraid. Not because he seeks scandal, but because he seeks what is real, and he rarely misses. So, when Bauer announced a new focus on Meghan Markle, the media landscape tensed. His book, Revenge, Meghan, Harry, and the War Between the Windsors, released in 2022, was not a gentle examination. It was a scalpel. And while many royal observers had grown numb to tabloid gossip and character critiques, Bauer's book broke through the noise. Why? Because it wasn't based on fluff or nameless rumors. It was grounded in research, dozens of interviews, archived records, and confidential briefings. In Revenge, Bauer meticulously chronicled Meghan's ascent, from Hollywood actress to duchess to global personality. He highlighted contradictions, inconsistencies, and grievances, but it was his analysis of the Sussexes' departure from royal life that hit hardest. He painted a picture not just of a couple escaping the constraints of the monarchy, but of two individuals rebranding their roles on their own terms, sometimes with what he described as startling self-interest. But even that wasn't the full storm. The real bombshell came not in Revenge, but in what Bauer hinted was coming next. In quiet interviews, cryptic social media commentary, and guarded leaks through media associates, Bauer began signaling that there was a deeper story still to come, one that didn't just reshape public perception, but shook the very foundation of what we had all been led to believe. That story was centered around Archie and Lilibet. According to those close to Bauer's current investigative efforts, he has spent over 2 years assembling material specifically focused on the inconsistencies surrounding the birth, documentation, and visibility of the Sussex children. His approach, as always, wasn't to rely on anonymous tips or tabloid hearsay, but to construct a timeline, verify statements, cross-reference documentation, and seek whistleblowers willing to speak, even if under condition of anonymity. And what he found, he says, stunned even him. In Bauer's estimation, the absence of critical public documentation around Archie and Lilibet is not just unusual, it is unprecedented for any royal offspring. Birth records, traditionally filed in the UK within weeks of birth, either don't exist in the public domain or are heavily redacted. The secrecy around their baptisms and godparents is unmatched. The lack of verifiable, spontaneous public photos of the children with extended royal family members, grandparents, cousins, even uncles and aunts, is bizarre by royal standards. But even more striking, according to Bauer's sources, is the behavioral shift within the palace itself. He claims to have spoken with former royal staffers who noted that even among senior aides, there was confusion and discomfort about the children. Invitations that mentioned them were phrased oddly. Events where they were expected never featured them. Family visits either didn't happen or were conducted behind total blackout conditions, without witnesses or standard procedure. In Bauer's experience, these patterns point to one of two scenarios. Either the Sussexes are protecting their children with an intensity that exceeds even the most privacy-obsessed celebrities, or the children are not biologically or legally connected in the way the public has been led to believe. And while both scenarios have dramatic implications, the latter carries explosive consequences. Which brings us to the importance of Bauer's voice in all this. There are plenty of commentators willing to speculate about the Sussex children. But Tom Bauer is different. He doesn't speculate. He investigates. And he publishes only when he believes the evidence is enough to survive scrutiny. His books have led to lawsuits, and he's won most of them. His claims have been fact-checked, and they've held up. His critics have tried to discredit him, but his record remains solid. So when Tom Bauer hints that something about Archie and Lilibet's existence is not what it seems, the world listens. Not because they want it to be true, not because they're desperate for scandal, but because when Bauer speaks, it usually means he's holding something sharp under the surface, something ready to cut through the polished narratives and expose the raw, messy truth underneath. And that's what makes his involvement so significant here. If Bauer is wrong, Meghan and Harry have an opportunity, perhaps even an obligation, to prove it. But if he's right, then the questions become far more difficult to answer. Who knew? Who helped? And why? Were legal frameworks bent? Were media organizations complicit? Were royals in the dark? Or worse, quietly aware? And where does the line fall between protecting a family and deceiving the world. These aren't just questions of privacy. They're questions of legitimacy, identity, and institutional integrity. And they are the kinds of questions Bauer has spent his life asking, no matter how uncomfortable the answers may be. Which brings us to the present moment. Bauer has confirmed that his findings will be included in an upcoming follow-up work. He promises documentation, witness accounts, photos, a timeline that challenges the one we've all been fed. And though no release date has been set, insiders say the manuscript is in final stages, and that the revelations could be more damning than anything in Revenge. Meanwhile, Meghan and Harry remain publicly silent. No statement, no legal filings, no interviews addressing the growing speculation. But silence, as Bauer well knows, doesn't mean nothing. It often means everything. In the coming chapters, we'll break down the details of the case he's constructing. We'll look at the timeline, the photos, the witnesses, and the missing records. We'll hear from former insiders, legal experts, digital forensic analysts, and concerned citizens. And we'll ask the question that now hovers over everything the Sussexes have built. What if the most important part of their story was never true? This is not tabloid gossip. This is an investigation. One that threatens to redefine not just the future of a family, but the legacy of one of the most public couples in modern history. And it all begins with the man willing to ask what no one else would dare. Tom Bauer. In the royal family, visibility is everything. It's not just tradition, it's currency. From the moment a child is born into the House of Windsor, there is a well-worn path, a sequence of carefully staged and documented appearances that ensures their existence, heritage, and place in the family hierarchy are publicly acknowledged and preserved. From Queen Elizabeth II to Prince Charles, Prince William to Prince George, the royal family's children have historically made their first public appearance within hours of birth, typically wrapped in a hospital-issued blanket in their mother's arms, as cameras snap photos and reporters scribble notes. There is pomp, there is protocol, and most importantly, there is undeniable physical presence. Archie Harrison Mountbatten-Windsor broke that mold. When Meghan Markle gave birth to Archie on May 6, 2019, the first break in royal tradition was immediate. There was no appearance outside the Lindo wing. No footage of the royal couple stepping out with their newborn. No chaotic yet joyful press rush on hospital steps. Instead, an announcement was made through the Sussexes' now-defunct Instagram account. The delivery location? A private Portland hospital in London. The time of birth? 5:26 a.m. 2 days later, a press call was arranged at St. George's Hall in Windsor Castle. This event was brief, tightly controlled, and notably shielded. The couple posed with Archie, swaddled in a white blanket, his face partially obscured, as Meghan beamed and Harry stood beside her. The moment was heavily stylized. There was no crowd, no casual exchanges, only one brief interaction with a pool reporter. From that point onward, appearances of Archie became increasingly rare. Throughout 2019, there were no verified public outings featuring Archie beyond the official christening photo, another carefully arranged and heavily edited image that immediately drew scrutiny. The ceremony was held privately at Windsor Castle. Unlike traditional royal christenings, there was no press access. The guest list was not disclosed in full. Most glaringly, the names of the godparents, traditionally shared, were withheld. The two photos released following the christening offered a glimpse of the baby in Harry's arms and a family portrait featuring Meghan, Harry, Charles, Camilla, Doria Ragland, and the Cambridges. In both pictures, Archie appeared quiet and somewhat stiff. Critics pointed out the child's seemingly disinterested or dazed expression, which prompted an early wave of skepticism about whether the child in the photo was Archie at all. These voices were initially dismissed as fringe, but in time, the questions grew louder. As 2020 began, Harry and Meghan announced their intention to step back from royal duties. This move, dubbed MEGHAN, was followed by their relocation to North America. With that came an even deeper level of privacy. For months, Archie wasn't seen. Not in airports, not on walks, not in paparazzi shots that had traditionally plagued other royals abroad. Unlike Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, who were photographed walking to school, playing in the park, or attending events with their parents, Archie remained invisible. Then came the Oprah interview in March 2021. The couple sat under the California sun, baring their souls in an explosive tell-all with Oprah Winfrey. While they spoke emotionally about their struggles with the royal family, institutional racism, and mental health, they also shared limited new details about Archie. Photos of him running on the beach were shown, but they were distant, overexposed, and in silhouette. No live footage of Archie speaking, laughing, or interacting was presented. Again, the audience accepted it. The couple deserved privacy. They had been hounded in the UK. Perhaps this was their way of shielding their son from the same fate Diana had suffered. But skeptics noticed something strange. For a couple who had made their lives into content, through docuseries, podcasts, and best-selling books, they were remarkably shy when it came to natural footage of their children. Then came Lilibet Diana. Born June 4, 2021, in Santa Barbara, California, her birth was announced through the couple's website, with no accompanying photo. The public was informed of her arrival days later, in a subdued post that lacked any imagery or details beyond a written statement. There was no hospital photo, no picture of Meghan holding her daughter, no family moment to commemorate her arrival. Months passed. No photos emerged. No sightings. No home videos. No casual interactions caught by accident. No one spotting the Sussexes at a park, a cafe, or even traveling with their children. In December 2021, a Christmas card was released. This image became the first public photograph of Lilibet Diana. In it, Meghan lifts the child in the air, Harry sits smiling beside her, and Archie, now a toddler, is perched casually on his father's knee. The scene is warm, soft, and picturesque, but it didn't take long for analysts to point out troubling inconsistencies. The lighting seemed off. The shadows didn't match. The children's skin tone and facial structure appeared odd, some said unnatural. Experts in digital imagery began dissecting the photo and raised the possibility that the image may have been heavily manipulated or even digitally composed. The family claimed the photo was taken by a close friend during a casual visit. No further imagery of Lilibet emerged until her first birthday, celebrated in the UK during the Queen's Platinum Jubilee in June 2022. A single photo of her sitting in the grass with a headband was released. The Sussexes claimed the image was taken in the garden of Frogmore Cottage. Again, the photo raised questions. Lilibet's features were barely visible. The picture offered no motion, no interaction, no confirming presence of other family members. And curiously, during the Jubilee events themselves, the children were not publicly seen. The Queen reportedly met Lilibet in private, but no images were taken. No public moment occurred between the monarch and the Sussex children. Even as cameras covered every inch of Buckingham Palace, Archie and Lilibet remained invisible. The royal family made no comment. Meghan and Harry said little. And the media moved on until recently. Tom Bower's investigation into the lack of public confirmation regarding the children's appearances reignited the fire. By compiling every official image and date since Archie's birth in 2019, Bower revealed something stunning. In over 4 years, not a single piece of video footage exists showing either child speaking, walking, or interacting in real time. There are only still photos. Carefully released. Often filtered. Often posed. Never raw. Compare this with Prince William's children, whose birthdays are celebrated with casual photos and homemade cakes, whose school runs are occasionally photographed, whose interactions with their parents reveal clear affection and human emotion. With the Sussex children, there's only the story we're told. No candid evidence. No confirmation by unaffiliated third parties. Supporters argue this is intentional. That Meghan and Harry, burned by the press, are simply taking extreme measures to protect their children's privacy. And to some extent, that makes sense. But the absence of even a single uncontrollable image, especially in today's world, feels increasingly implausible. And that's where the mystery begins to feel less like privacy and more like orchestration. What began as a decision to withhold details has now evolved into a full-blown enigma. One with timelines that don't quite match, photos that raise digital red flags, and a conspicuous silence that speaks louder than words. As we continue to examine these patterns, the question grows louder. Are these children real? Or are we looking at the most carefully constructed illusion in recent memory? The answer may lie not just in what we've seen, but in what we haven't. In a world defined by data, documentation isn't just bureaucracy, it's proof of existence. When it comes to children born into royal lineage, the need for transparency becomes even more pronounced. Every record matters. Every certificate, every signature, every public registration is not only a symbol of legitimacy, but a binding link to tradition, law, and lineage. And yet, when one examines the official paper trail for Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana, what emerges isn't a lineage, it's a void. When Archie was born on May 6, 2019, the public expected a swift release of his birth certificate. In the United Kingdom, birth certificates for royal children are typically published quickly, with details including the place of birth, the full name, and the parentage clearly documented. For Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, their certificates were available and scrutinized within days of birth, with copies made public for all to see. With Archie, however, something strange happened. His birth certificate was not published immediately. In fact, it wasn't publicly released until nearly 2 weeks after his birth, and when it did surface, it sparked confusion and controversy. The place of birth was listed as Portland Hospital in London, which was not the originally rumored venue. Meghan's occupation was listed as Princess of the United Kingdom, a title she doesn't commonly use and which raised questions, since she and Harry had rejected the use of HRH titles in personal branding. But the oddity wasn't just in the delay or the wording. It was in the environment surrounding its release. No press announcement. No formal explanation for the wait. No confirmation from hospital officials. It simply appeared in the official records, quietly, after persistent pressure from the media. This odd behavior became even more noticeable when comparing it to Lilibet's birth record. Born on June 4, 2021, in Santa Barbara, California, Lilibet's birth was announced via the Archwell website several days after the fact. Her name was given as Lilibet Diana Mountbatten-Windsor, a nod to the Queen's childhood nickname and the late Princess of Wales. But the birth certificate itself raised immediate red flags. When it was finally acquired by reporters in California under the state's public records access laws, the document showed Prince Harry listed as the Duke of Sussex under first name and His Royal Highness under last name. Despite the fact that the couple had already stepped back from using those styles in an official capacity. Even more curious, the document listed Meghan's occupation not as actress or public figure, but simply as Rachel Meghan Markle, with no profession recorded at all. While none of this was illegal, the inconsistencies mounted. The birth certificate for Lilibet was sparse, minimal details, no hospital logo, no doctor's name, no signature from attending medical staff, no indication of time of birth. In many jurisdictions, these details are standard. The lack of them raised eyebrows. Was this an official copy or an abstract? Had elements been redacted? Was it issued through private channels? Despite requests for clarification from journalists and media outlets, the Sussexes never addressed the inconsistencies. No press conference, no follow-up, just silence. And then came the questions about baptism. For Archie, the christening took place on July 6, 2019, 2 months after his birth. The ceremony was conducted by the Archbishop of Canterbury at Windsor Castle's private chapel. But unlike past royal christenings, it was held in total secrecy. No media access. No public acknowledgement of godparents. No footage of the family arriving or departing. The 2 images released were carefully posed. One featured Meghan, Harry, Archie, and a few select family members. The other was a more traditional group portrait. But the godparents? Kept secret. The names never officially released. The royal family claimed this was for privacy. Critics weren't so sure. Every other royal christening in recent memory had been a public affair. Prince George's took place at the Chapel Royal at St. James's Palace. Princess Charlotte's was held at the Church of St. Mary Magdalene in Sandringham. Prince Louis was christened at the Chapel Royal. All 3 events included public appearances and official guest lists. For Archie, nothing. And for Lilibet, even less. As of today, no official record of a christening exists. There has been no confirmation from any church in the United Kingdom or the United States. No date, no officiant, no photos, no formal statement. In March 2023, a spokesperson for Harry and Meghan confirmed that Lilibet had been christened at their Montecito home in a private ceremony officiated by the Archbishop of Los Angeles. But unlike previous events involving royal children, no documentation, photos, or guest lists were provided. There was no evidence of attendance by royal family members. No witnesses outside of the couple's immediate circle. Nothing to verify the event occurred beyond the couple's word. This absence of documentation has created a troubling pattern. In royal tradition, Transparency in life events is part of public duty. From marriages to births to baptisms, each milestone is recorded, shared, and acknowledged in ways that reinforce legitimacy, heritage, and public confidence. In the case of Archie and Lilibet, each step has been obfuscated, delayed, or hidden. This becomes especially problematic when considering titles and legal status. Both children were granted the right to use the titles prince and princess following the ascension of King Charles III. Yet critics argue that without clear documentation of their birth, lineage, and standing, these titles are based on assumption, not confirmation. And then there's the matter of school registration. As of 2023, Archie would be 4 years old enough for preschool or early education. Yet there has been no confirmation of enrollment in any California institution. No spotted drop-offs. No school announcements. No charity involvement, which royal children often participate in from a young age. Lilibet, now 2, is nearing the age of toddler programs, and again, no public trace of her beyond the handful of staged photos the couple has released. It's the paper trail that is most damning, not because it confirms wrongdoing, but because it offers no clarity. In a time where records are digital, accessible, and required for everything from travel to healthcare, the absence of such information is jarring. Tom Bauer's investigation into this paper trail, or lack thereof, is what gives his theory weight. Because it's not just about photos. It's about public records, legal proof, verifiable data. And when that data doesn't exist, or is so carefully guarded that it might as well not, people begin to question everything. Do Archie and Lilibet exist? Were they born naturally, via surrogacy, or adopted? Are their names, dates of birth, and parental assignments accurately recorded? And if not, why? If it's about privacy, there are ways to maintain it while still confirming legitimacy. But if it's about control or concealment, that's a very different story, and it's one that's only beginning to unravel. Photographs are among the most powerful forms of proof. In a single frame, a photo can capture time, emotion, memory, and identity. But in a digital age where images can be altered with a few clicks, even the most seemingly innocent photo can raise 100 questions. And in the case of Meghan Markle, Prince Harry, and their children Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana, the photos tell a very strange story, one filled with odd lighting, digital inconsistencies, limited visibility, and a pattern of avoidance that only deepens the suspicion. Since 2019, there have been fewer than a dozen verified images of Archie. For Lilibet, even fewer. And yet, each one has triggered disproportionate scrutiny, not because the public demands to see children for entertainment, but because these photos are often the only public-facing proof that the children exist at all. Let's begin with the earliest photo released of Archie. It was part of a tightly orchestrated appearance 2 days after his birth, inside St. George's Hall at Windsor Castle. The photo was taken from a distance. Archie's face was partially obscured. The image, while sentimental, was not what the public had come to expect. There was no movement, no candidness, and no spontaneous interaction, only static poses and careful angles. What stood out was how deliberate the entire presentation felt. From the lighting to the pose to the framing, it felt more like a product image than a family moment. Professional photographers and body language experts at the time noted the stiffness of the shot. Harry's grip on the baby seemed unnatural, almost rehearsed. Meghan, radiant as always, smiled, but her gaze remained fixed on the lens rather than on her child. The image made headlines for being different, but few were willing to publicly call it what some already suspected. It didn't feel real. From there, the trend continued. Take, for instance, the official family photo released after Archie's christening in July 2019. The now iconic shot featured the couple, their infant son, Doria Ragland, Prince Charles and Camilla, and the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. While everyone was dressed immaculately and the composition seemed formal enough, one oddity immediately sparked online debate: Archie's expression. In the photo, Archie appeared strangely stoic. His gaze did not align with the others in the room. Some claimed the baby looked lifeless. Others remarked that his hands and posture seemed unnaturally rigid. Whispers emerged that perhaps this wasn't a real baby at all, that it might be a prop, a doll used for the photo op. This idea, at the time, was dismissed by mainstream media. But on YouTube and internet forums, digital analysts began dissecting the image. Multiple breakdowns of the photo pointed out strange inconsistencies in the shadowing. The lighting on Archie's head didn't match that on the rest of the family. His outline appeared overly sharp in contrast with the soft focus filter applied to the rest of the image. Analysts proposed that the baby may have been composited into the photo afterward using editing software. Such claims were considered outlandish then, but they didn't go away. In 2020, as the couple moved to North America and began a new chapter away from the royal family, Archie essentially vanished from public view. No paparazzi photos. No family vacation snaps. No casual encounters at the grocery store. Despite living in California, surrounded by media and fans, the couple managed to exist without ever being publicly photographed with their children. This alone was remarkable. Then came the Oprah interview in March 2021. During the broadcast, Meghan and Harry shared a short video clip of Archie running along a beach. It was in silhouette, filmed from behind. He was wearing a hoodie, his face never visible. The same pattern followed in the Netflix docuseries. Any footage of the children was either blurry, taken from behind, in shadow, or from an angle that obscured the facial features. One photo featured Archie touching a picture of Diana on the wall. It was widely circulated, but again, it lacked confirmation. The boy's face was either cropped or turned. There was nothing to clearly match that child to the infant seen previously. Then came the 2021 Sussex family Christmas card. The image showed Meghan lifting baby Lilibet above her head while Harry sat with Archie on his lap. The setting appeared candid, cheerful, and natural until it was analyzed. Several digital editors raised concerns over the lighting in the photo. The shadow cast by Lilibet did not align with those of Meghan or the tree behind her. Archie's facial proportions looked digitally softened. Moreover, the entire image seemed heavily processed, with a painterly blur effect applied across much of the frame. Some suggested that the image might have been created using compositing, placing separate images of the children and the parents into a shared digital background. No one could prove it definitively, but the fact that so many had to try says everything. In June 2022, during the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, the couple released the long-awaited solo image of Lilibet Diana for her first birthday. The child, dressed in a light blue dress, was seated on the grass, wearing a smile and a headband. The photo, according to reports, was taken at Frogmore Cottage during a private gathering. This image raised further questions. Photographers pointed out the lack of ambient detail in the photo. The grass had no texture. The shadows under Lilibet's feet were shallow and directionless. The background was conveniently blurred beyond recognition. More concerning was Lilibet's posture, which appeared unnaturally upright for a 1-year-old. Some claimed the photo had been digitally enhanced. Others suggested it was a generated or heavily edited image made to look real. Still, the image was accepted by the press without question. Since then, no new images of Lilibet have surfaced in a natural setting. No videos. No spontaneous moments. Every image, if released at all, is staged, still, and impersonal. In contrast, Prince George, Charlotte, and Louis are photographed in motion, engaged in activity, laughing, playing, or participating in official royal events. Their faces change as they age. They exist in time. They grow in the public's eye. They're human. With Archie and Lilibet, the public has only glimpses, static, highly controlled snapshots frozen in time, like mannequins arranged in a display. Even the Sussex's most recent photos for public campaigns and social media efforts focus on Meghan and Harry. The children are conspicuously absent from nearly every visual communication that involves live action, conversation, or interaction. Tom Bower's investigation into these photos included interviews with digital imaging experts and forensic analysts. According to Bower's sources, at least 3 of the most widely shared images of the children show signs of post-production manipulation. These include alterations to skin texture, resizing of features, inconsistent lighting, and background artifacts consistent with compositing. One expert claimed that in the Christmas card, the depth of field around Lilibet was impossible to replicate using a standard camera lens under natural lighting. Another noted that Archie's facial proportions in the Oprah clip didn't match earlier photos of him as a baby. These findings don't conclusively prove the children are fabricated, but they add layers to an already suspicious narrative. And here's what makes it worse. Harry and Meghan have the ability to end this speculation instantly. They could post a short video of their children playing in the backyard. They could share candid footage during a public outing. They could bring their kids to a family gathering, even privately, where their existence could be quietly confirmed by witnesses. But they haven't. And the longer they delay, the more people begin to ask the uncomfortable question. Are these photos covering something up? Are the children real and simply hidden? Or are they carefully curated images, created to preserve a story that may not be true? The answer may lie not in what's in the frame, but in what's missing from it. Because in the world of digital manipulation, it's not the images we see that should worry us. It's the ones we never get to see at all. There is an inherent tension that exists between public life and private parenting. For most families, this tension is manageable. School photos, holiday snapshots, and the occasional social media post form a curated but generally uncontroversial visual archive of a child's early years. For royals, however, that balance has always been harder to strike. Add the glare of global attention, centuries of tradition, and an increasingly aggressive digital media ecosystem, and what you get is a pressure cooker of expectation, intrusion, and judgment. But Meghan Markle and Prince Harry were never going to be typical royal parents. From the moment they stepped into the public eye, it became clear that the Sussexes were building something different, both in their relationship with the monarchy and their identity as a family. They wanted to redefine what it meant to live as public figures. They rejected the expected structure. They dismissed precedent. They challenged the institution's rules. And in the process, they built walls around their private lives that few could penetrate. So why, if Archie and Lilibet do exist, are they so hidden? Why has the world only seen carefully curated, often ambiguous photos? Why has there been no candid video footage, no school enrollment confirmations, no organic encounters at public events? To understand that, we must first consider the most generous explanation: safety. For Meghan and Harry, the trauma of media intrusion is not theoretical, it's lived. Harry watched as paparazzi chased his mother to her death. Meghan endured what she described as character assassination at the hands of the British tabloids. The couple has openly discussed how the pressure of public life led them to the brink of mental and emotional collapse. In this context, the instinct to protect their children from the same chaos is not just understandable, it's expected. Their move to Montecito, California, was about distance, geographical and emotional. It was about carving out a world where they could raise their children in peace, away from flashbulbs, tabloid speculation, and institutional rigidity. In this version of the story, their secrecy is an act of love. A protective cocoon spun tightly around two young children who never asked for fame or legacy. But love, while a compelling defense, does not fully explain the deliberate and continued absence of verification. Because other royal children have enjoyed relative privacy without disappearing entirely. Prince George and Princess Charlotte attend school with their peers. They participate in public events with their parents. Their milestones are marked with photos, but not invasive ones. Their names appear on school rosters, their faces are occasionally seen, and their voices have been heard. The same can be said for children of celebrities who live under intense scrutiny: Beyoncé and Jay-Z, Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively, Kristen Bell and Dax Shepard all manage to shield their children without erasing them. Blurred faces, limited appearances, and private schooling allow for balance. What's different about Meghan and Harry is the near-total blackout, not just of candid moments, but of independent verification, which leads us to the second possibility: control. From their earliest days as a couple, Meghan and Harry have been obsessed with controlling their narrative. Whether through lawsuits, press statements, or curated media appearances, they have worked diligently to manage how the world perceives them. It's not a unique impulse. Many celebrities do the same, but the Sussexes' version of this control has taken on a kind of rigidity that often appears performative. If the children are real, it's possible the Sussexes view their visibility as part of a larger branding strategy. Perhaps they believe the mystery enhances their public appeal. Perhaps they see the children as off-limits components of their private life, to be used only when the narrative demands it. Maybe they fear that showing too much would unravel the carefully built mystique they've spent years cultivating. Or perhaps, more cynically, the children are viewed as shields, tools that can be invoked to deflect criticism or elicit sympathy. In moments of public scrutiny, Meghan and Harry have often cited their desire to protect Archie and Lilibet as justification for their decisions. "We're doing this for our children," they say. And perhaps they are. But without evidence of those children's daily lives, without even basic confirmation of their presence, it's hard not to question the validity of that shield. There's also the issue of legal leverage. Children provide a powerful legal and emotional justification for privacy demands. Courts are more likely to side with parents who claim harm to minors. Media outlets are more cautious when minors are involved. Public backlash is swift and merciless when children are seen as targets. All of this creates a dynamic where the idea of children, even if never fully seen, becomes a potent force in shaping how the couple is treated, written about, and legally protected. Could that be exploited? Yes. Has it been? That remains the question. Then there's the third, more complex possibility: surrogate birth, adoption, or non-traditional parentage. These scenarios are not inherently scandalous. Thousands of families are built through surrogacy and adoption, and most experience no public doubt about their authenticity. But in the world of royalty, lineage is everything. If Archie and Lilibet were born via surrogate, and that fact was withheld or obscured, it could spark questions about titles, succession, and even legal status within the royal framework. British royal protocol is outdated and steeped in tradition. It does not always make room for modern methods of family building. There is no formal rule against surrogate children being in the line of succession, but there is also no precedent. And in the absence of precedent, speculation fills the void. If Meghan and Harry chose to withhold the truth about the children's birth, whether to protect themselves, to prevent legal complications, or to avoid public scrutiny, that decision, while understandable, may have laid the groundwork for the current crisis. And then there's the fourth, most controversial possibility: the children are not present in the way we've been led to believe. Perhaps they are real but do not live full-time with Meghan and Harry. Perhaps they are being raised by others, shielded so completely that not even their extended family sees them. Or, as the most extreme theories suggest, perhaps their existence is not consistent at all. Perhaps they are partially fabricated, constructs of a narrative built to reinforce the idea of a young, growing family when in reality, something more complicated or more calculated lies beneath. This theory, once dismissed as a conspiracy, has gained traction due to the totality of the blackout. The absence of video, the inconsistencies in photos, the missing documents, the evasive answers, the fact that not even royal insiders, people with every reason to be close to the children, have spoken openly or naturally about them. And when questioned, the Sussexes respond not with clarity, but with distance. So what does this all mean? It means that the reasons Meghan and Harry might hide their children are as varied as they are unsettling. It could be love. It could be fear. It could be control. It could be legal precaution. Or it could be something else, something that hasn't been fully revealed. The world has given them space, given them the benefit of the doubt, trusted that their decisions, while unconventional, were grounded in a desire to do what's best for their children. But trust requires balance. And when questions are met not with answers, but with silence, suspicion inevitably grows. The question isn't just why Meghan and Harry might hide their children. It's why they continue to do so even when they could easily prove everything in 30 seconds. A birthday party, a video clip, a school enrollment, a casual family outing. These are non-invasive demands. They are normal fragments of life that every other royal child, and most celebrity children, experience without jeopardy. So why not Archie and Lilibet? That's the question we must keep asking. Because if the children do exist, they deserve to be known, at least enough to put the worst theories to rest. And if they don't? Then we are looking at a deception that redefines everything we thought we knew about the couple who claimed to stand for truth, transparency, and freedom. The Montecito estate was meant to be a refuge, a place of silence, serenity, and control. A world away from the loud halls of Buckingham Palace, the camera flashes of London tabloids, and the whispers of royal aides. Nestled in the California hills, Harry and Meghan build a fortress not just of stone and security, but of image. A curated lifestyle, a controlled narrative, a boundary that no longer relied on royal rules but on their own carefully drawn lines. But on the morning news that leaked Tom Bower's latest claims that Archie and Lilibet's existence may not be what the public believed, those lines shattered. According to sources close to Montecito insiders, Meghan's reaction was immediate. Not stunned, not confused, not hurt, furious. The story, as first hinted in Bower's brief but deliberately worded teaser, didn't say the children didn't exist outright. It didn't make direct accusations. It did something far more insidious. It asked questions. It pointed to missing documentation, inconsistent photos, lack of credible witnesses. It dangled enough breadcrumbs to ignite a firestorm, but not enough to legally constitute defamation. It was this that enraged Meghan most, the strategy. She wasn't dealing with a tabloid anymore. She was dealing with Tom Bower, a journalist known not just for exposing the truth, but for doing so through the slow, surgical leaking of facts and implications, leaving his targets to squirm, react, and often self-destruct. Inside the Montecito mansion, the mood changed swiftly. Meghan, according to staff who spoke off the record, went into what one assistant called crisis war room mode. Phone calls to legal advisors began within the hour. A special emergency meeting was called with their PR firm, one they had been working with since the release of their Netflix docuseries. But what surprised many was that there was no clear plan. Because Bauer had not accused. He had merely asked. And to respond to a question, especially one designed to trap, was to validate it. So Meghan paced. She didn't scream. She didn't break things. But those closest to her described her as internally volcanic. A quiet rage, simmering just beneath the surface. That kind of fury that comes not from being wronged, but from being outmaneuvered. She had worked too hard to control the narrative. She had walked away from the firm. She had survived public mockery, racial innuendo, and relentless pressure from the UK media machine. She had rebuilt a public life in America on her terms. Book deals, TV projects, podcasts, carefully worded interviews. And now it was all under threat, not because of a scandal of her own making, but because of the one thing she couldn't manufacture, the perception of authenticity. If people began to doubt that Archie and Lilibet were real, then everything fell apart. The core of their story, their exit from the royal family, was built on the desire to protect their children. They had told Oprah and the world that they stepped away to raise their family in safety, that the firm had denied Archie a title, protection, and fairness, that racism had shadowed their son's future. The emotional power of their departure came from the image of a mother protecting her baby from an institution that saw him as lesser. But what if the baby wasn't real? Or worse, what if the public began to believe that? The fury wasn't just emotional. It was strategic. Meghan, always a keen observer of media cycles, knew how quickly narratives could spiral once doubt took root. Once the public began to ask questions, the press would follow. Not the tabloids, but the ones who had once embraced her. The outlets she had trusted with her truth. She knew Tom Bauer wouldn't be alone for long. So she asked a question that echoed through her team. What are we doing about this? The answers were vague. Legal action? Against whom? Bauer hadn't printed anything actionable yet. Press release? Deny what? That the children exist? That they're real? Wouldn't that only pour fuel on the fire? And then came the worst suggestion of all, silence. Multiple advisors suggested doing nothing, waiting, letting the storm burn itself out. But Meghan hated silence. She knew what silence could do. It was what had allowed the worst headlines to fester back in 2018. It was what had buried her voice in the palace. Silence, in her view, wasn't dignified. It was complicit. So she pivoted. If she couldn't go on the offensive yet, she would prepare. Reports say she made calls to Oprah's team, testing the waters on a follow-up. A second sit-down, this time to reinforce the emotional truth of her motherhood. Not a rebuttal, but a reset. Others say she began combing through potential allies in the press. Journalists who owed her favors or had written favorably in the past. She needed to remind the world that she was a mother, that Archie and Lilibet were real, loved, and present. But the problem remained. No recent photos. No videos. No birthdays attended by verifiable guests. No moments outside of the home that could shut this down with a single frame. And releasing a photo now, after Bauer's claims, would look like damage control. Meghan was cornered. Meanwhile, Harry, according to those close to the couple, responded differently. He was quiet, withdrawn. He didn't match Meghan's intensity. He didn't see Bauer as a threat in the same way. After years of being the family's internal outcast, he had learned to disengage. But Meghan needed more. She needed him to fight. The tension between them, while not new, grew heavier in the days that followed the leak. Meghan wanted action. Harry wanted retreat. And the palace? Utter silence. If she was hoping for royal solidarity, for a public statement from Charles or William confirming the children's existence, it never came. That silence, she believed, was deliberate. She saw it not as neutrality, but as betrayal. The royal family had everything to gain from letting the speculation swirl. It made her look unstable. It made Harry look disloyal. And it brought public sympathy back to the firm, who suddenly appeared, by comparison, normal and united. So Meghan became more agitated. Her conversations with staff became shorter. Her expectations sharper. Her public appearances were pulled back. Events postponed. Interviews delayed. This wasn't just a PR headache anymore. It was an existential threat. and the fury began to show. According to one staffer, Meghan snapped during a closed-door meeting, slamming her hand on a table and asking, "How many times do I have to prove I'm telling the truth before people believe me?" No one had an answer. Because in today's world, truth is no longer what you say, it's what you can show. And she had nothing new to show. What Meghan feared most was already happening, the quiet shift in public tone. The articles with more skeptical headlines. The commentators who began to admit that maybe, not certainly, but maybe, Bauer had a point. That the inconsistencies were too many. That the patterns couldn't be ignored. And Meghan knew that once you lose the narrative, you don't get it back. Not in full. Not ever. The rage she felt wasn't just about the children. It was about the loss of control. She had played by her own rules, rewritten the fairy tale, and broken free of a system she believed was rotten at its core. But now, someone else was writing the ending. And she didn't like where it was going. To the casual observer, Buckingham Palace is a monument to pageantry, its golden gates, looming balconies, and stone-faced guards a reminder of centuries of tradition. But behind those grand facades is a machine. A strategic, calculating institution that has survived war, scandal, abdication, and revolution, not because of transparency, but because of discipline. When the storm rages, the crown does not explain. It outlasts. So when the whispers about Archie and Lilibet began swirling again, this time propelled by Tom Bauer's bombshell implications, the palace response was exactly what seasoned royal watchers expected. Nothing. No statement. No clarification. No denial. No visible concern. Just a firm and total silence. But silence from the royal family doesn't mean indifference. It means calculation. According to insiders close to royal aides, there was indeed talk behind palace walls. As the speculation spread across global media, and Tom Bauer's hints gained traction, high-level staff within Clarence House and Kensington Palace reportedly gathered for confidential briefings. The goal wasn't to decide how to respond, it was to decide whether they should respond at all. And the answer was a resounding no. Why? Because every time the firm has directly addressed a scandal, it has made headlines twice, once for the original issue and once for the response. Their policy is ancient but effective: never complain, never explain. To deny would be to give legitimacy to the question. To confirm anything would mean stepping into a minefield of legal and emotional landmines. But beneath the surface, the discomfort was palpable. Sources close to King Charles revealed that the monarch was visibly frustrated when briefed on the rumors. Not because he believed them, necessarily, but because he understood their implications. He knew that the legitimacy of Archie and Lilibet was tied, however unfairly, to the legitimacy of the royal family's own decisions. It was Charles, after all, who had quietly allowed the Sussex children to receive their titles of prince and princess following Queen Elizabeth II's death. It was Charles who had extended an olive branch by inviting Harry and Meghan to royal events. If the children didn't exist, or even if they existed in a way that contradicted royal tradition, it would reflect poorly on him. That said, those close to Charles claim he was more exasperated than shaken. His opinion, according to a senior aide, was blunt: let them handle it. Charles had no desire to get involved in what he saw as a problem of Harry and Meghan's own making. In his mind, if they had chosen to isolate themselves from the institution, then they could face the consequences of that isolation. He wasn't going to use royal credibility to clean up their narrative. Prince William's camp, on the other hand, had a more emotionally driven response. Though William has long been known for his composure, those familiar with his private demeanor say he was deeply unsettled by the resurgence of the rumors. He is, above all, protective of the crown and its image. But he is also a father. And regardless of his fractured relationship with Harry, William knew that children, real children, were now at the center of a global conspiracy. His reaction, however, was not to defend them publicly, but to reinforce his own family's visibility. In the days following the media frenzy, William and Kate made a series of highly visible appearances with their children. George was photographed at a school football match. Charlotte appeared in a new photo baking with her mother. Louis was seen playing near their Norfolk estate. These weren't coincidences. They were signals. This was the firm's way of reminding the world: our children are present. They are real. They are part of the institution. And it worked. While Meghan and Harry faced renewed scrutiny over doctored photos and missing records, the Cambridges, or now, the Prince and Princess of Wales, looked calm, stable, and fully integrated. The contrast was stark and intentional. Even Princess and known for her no-nonsense approach to royal duty, was said to have expressed concern, not about the rumors, but about the institution's exposure to such vulnerabilities. According to a close source, and was blunt, "This is why we keep things in-house." She, like many others within the family, saw the issue not as a matter of truth or fiction, but as a symptom of what happens when royals go rogue. What made things even more complicated was the absence of Queen Elizabeth II. Had she been alive, the speculation might have been easier to neutralize. Her authority, moral, symbolic, and institutional, could silence controversy with a look. But in her absence, the monarchy felt more fragile, and no one wanted to risk cracking the surface further. That's why no one, within the senior royal circle stepped forward. Not Charles, not William, not Camilla, not Kate. No one issued a single word confirming or denying the rumors. No one appeared in public with Meghan's children. No one volunteered a memory or a moment with Archie or Lilibet, because to do so would have created a precedent. And once precedent is set, it's hard to take back. It's worth noting that this strategy is not new. When Prince Andrew's connections to Jeffrey Epstein surfaced, the palace maintained total silence until it became a legal liability. When Princess Diana gave her infamous Panorama interview, the firm stayed silent until it began to damage their institutional credibility. The strategy has always been the same: say nothing unless you must. And right now, the firm doesn't believe it must. They're watching, of course. They're monitoring the reaction, reading the headlines, reviewing the briefings sent to private secretaries and communications advisors. But they will not intervene unless there is proof, or unless public opinion shifts so drastically that inaction becomes a threat. What's more, the royal family knows something that most people don't. They don't need to prove anything. The burden of proof lies with Meghan and Harry. They're the ones who left. They're the ones who asked for privacy. They're the ones who built a brand on transparency while withholding verifiable evidence. And now, they're the ones under fire, not the institution. This is the ultimate irony. For years, Meghan and Harry accused the royal family of manipulating narratives, of hiding behind palace walls while controlling public perception, of refusing to protect them when the media turned toxic. But now, faced with a narrative they can't control, Meghan and Harry are realizing what the royal family has always known: silence can be more powerful than any statement. It's not necessarily right. It's not necessarily fair. But it's effective. And from behind the walls of Windsor, Sandringham, and Balmoral, the message is clear: the firm will not defend what it did not create. If Meghan and Harry want to fight this battle, they'll do it alone. And if Archie and Lilibet are real, the evidence will speak for itself. If they are not, then the firm's silence will become the loudest condemnation of all.